On this episode of the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, our first episode of 2025, we've got our fourth annual installment of 5 New Year's resolutions for camp this year. Welcome to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, where we turn numbers into stories and data into insights. We dive deep into theology and research, paired with practical wisdom and action steps to help camping ministries thrive. I'm your host and producer, Jared Rendell, a camp enthusiast and part of the Sacred Playgrounds team. This podcast features Dr. Jake Sorensen, a scholar, author, practitioner, and the founder of Sacred Playgrounds. Be sure to subscribe, submit a question to us to be featured on the podcast, and click that support button to help make these episodes happen. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at Sacred Playgrounds or at sacredplaygrounds.com. Wonder with us what God might have in store at your Sacred Playground. Hey, welcome to the playground, everyone. Happy New Year, Jake.
Happy New Year, Jared.
Happy New Year, listeners. 2025, man. I typed it for the first time yesterday.
Ooh, how did it feel?
It's always, I almost messed it up, of course. I had to delete. I was typing, I was signing a kid up for something. I type in the date and had to type it in, and then I had to delete 2024 and put back 2025, and I'll be doing that until May.
I had practice on the furnace filter. When I changed the furnace filter on January 1st, I made sure to write 2025 on it just to practice.
Just to get it started. Kick it off.
I do change the furnace filter more than once a year, everybody, just so you know.
Here's my one for the year.
I did.
It was a good year.
It was a good year, in so many ways. There's a lot of good things to look back on and be thankful for. And so it was fun. It's one of our annual traditions. I know a lot of people do this, but what were some highlights from 2024? And so, talking about obviously the eclipse, which, we talked about on the podcast, and, climbing a 14er.
That's fun.
And, just time with family and some of the trips. And it's been, it was a good year. And so a lot to look forward to in 2025 though, as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that is true for us. That is true for my, me and my family personally. And that's true for Sacred Playgrounds too. Because there's some fun stuff coming, some new things, some continuation of things. So, we'll obviously be rolling those out. But we start where we have on this podcast for the last, and we can say now this is a 4th annual.
Whoa.
Isn't that there's a thing that could be 4th annual with this?
It's amazing.
That's so fun. So this is our 4th annual New Year's resolution for camp episode. So we've got 5 today that we're going to share with you. These resolutions for 2025, these kind of data-backed, these are things that we've either, we have been learning, continue to learn, that we've, some that we've talked about in some ways here and there that it's time to take action on in our camp culture and our camp communities overall. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, let's dive into that in a second. First, let's do our quick camp question. Who came up with that word?
Quick camp question.
It's New Year's resolution day, so you get to drop yours in the comments, and Jake and I will share right now. So our quick camp question, because we're camp people, so it counts as a camp question, is our own. Let's see how we do this year. We're going to put them out into the public, Jake. Our own New Year's resolutions. Tell me about a New Year's resolution for you yourself this year.
All right. I'm going to go, this is still ambitious, but it's less so, it's a different sort of ambitious, and I'm going to have some accountability with this one. And so my in-laws were down for New Year's, and my mother-in-law, she's an outdoor enthusiast, just like the rest of us in the family, but she's got a lot of mobility issues now, right, as she's gotten older. And so one of the things that she still really enjoys doing and has been able to do with her mobility challenges is bird watching. And so she's got bird feeders and things like that. And so she loves identifying birds and things like that. And she introduced me to this bird watching app because I enjoy watching birds too. But this allows you to identify new birds that you you see, and so it's got the identification and everything like that. But then it tracks what you identified, when and where. And so since I started on January 1st, I was like, oh, I can do this and try to keep identifying new birds. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I've got this this app. It's from Cornell University, and it's called the Merlin Bird ID app. And
Interesting.
it's got a life list, so you can track the birds that you identified throughout your life, which of course for me started on January 1st. So you've heard the concept of the big year,
Fresh start.
where bird watchers go around and they try to identify as many species as possible in a year. And there's records for like Minnesota or Wisconsin or the United States or the whole world. And so there's people that identify 5,000 plus
Like,
species in a year.
Gamified that. Wow.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, there's actually an Owen Wilson and Jack Black movie called The Big Year. And where they're going around, and Steve Martin's in it. They go around trying to. Yes,
I've never heard of this.
It's like a competitive sport. You go out and you're identifying birds. And I thought this would be a great thing to do for this year, because I do a little bit of traveling. I get to see different places, and but to be more intentional about watching for wildlife, this is one of the things that can really help doing that. So obviously I'm an outdoor enthusiast and love
it.
intricacies of God's creation. So that's my New Year's resolution, is I am going to be tracking bird species and identifying them. And my goal, so I'm gonna set a reasonable goal. I think I'm gonna try to identify 100 species, which it's gonna take a little bit of time. Although I have 11 already from my home bird feeder.
Good start.
But it's a good start. But I mean, it's gonna take some effort
work,
to get to 100 and actually record them. So that's mine.
You're gonna have to have an extra, like when you get to go to camp this year. Like we got camp visits that we'll do. You're gonna have to like take a day. Excuse me, I need an extra day on my trip because I'm just gonna go walk around.
Yes.
But that map of where you identify them is gonna be amazing.
It's gonna be fun.
That's gonna be good.
And
that's
so
gonna be fun.
Even when I was out for my first run of the year, as I was running, I was like, "Oh, there's a bird. What is it?" It flies away and I can't identify it. So I was like, "Shoot, I gotta figure this out." But oftentimes when I'm at a new camp, I will go for a run and try to find some trails and things like that. And so anyway, that's the hope and the plan. And I will try to keep you updated. As we go through
now
the
we're
year
invested
on how many species I've identified. So I'm at 11.
We'll have to ask
in the
what
first couple of days. So yeah. All right.
Good start.
Did that give enough time for you to think of one for you?
I knew mine. All right. So I gotta read this year. Which is more than one year I've been like, hey, I need to get back into pages of physical books. But I almost by way of preview of sorts, like getting a system in place of some kind. Me just saying, oh, I really got to do that. We know lots of resolutions that doesn't work for. So setting a system in place. So I have a 7th grader, and he doesn't have a phone yet, smart device, and really genuinely is like one of the 3 kids we know, which is when we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
So he doesn't. We're slowly getting there, and so that might happen this year. But we didn't really want to do that as like a gift. We didn't want to do that as a birthday or Christmas gift. We want this thing to feel that we don't want to place it at that kind of level. And so the short is we're going to make him earn it, and we're going to make him earn it with a handful of good life things. And for him to get back into some reading, he used to love to read, and he's a sports kid and loves that. And so he's just gotten away from that some. And so some music practice and reading are some things that we want to support his rhythm in that. And so I'm going to join him in that.
Nice.
So I don't know exactly how we're going to set it, but it'll be a thing we'll do together at some, in some way. So
okay,
I am hoping to read, and like you see all these end of the year lists from people. Have you seen these? Like their Goodreads lists, and they're like, 217 books, and I'm like, I haven't read 217 books in my life, unless Paw Patrol counts.
I don't think I've seen 200. Like some people though with 25, 30, 40.
I saw people with multiple hundreds of books that they got through, and I was so impressed. Anyway, I'm gonna hope to read 3 to 5.
Okay.
is the
3 to
sustainable
5
goal,
in
and
the whole year?
in the whole year. All right,
Okay.
and I'm not gonna. I mean, again, not Paw Patrol books. These are
Yeah.
me, and I read
Oh,
slow,
yeah.
and I take a while, and I take it in. So I want
Yep.
to read 3 to 5 really good things for my soul, and that's the plan.
Alrighty. Choose
And I'm going to
wisely.
use my 7th grader as my accountability,
Use the 7th grader and get a Goodreads account, and then you can
and I
track it.
should get a Goodreads account. That way I can
There you
track
go.
it, right? Like your
Or
bird
some
app.
other
Okay,
app, you know.
whatever works. You guys, thanks for letting us dive in there for a second as we process our lives here. If you've got some that are fun, or if in particular you have a system or resource for yours that's interesting, drop that in the comments. Right? Goodreads, Cornell Birdwatching app, whatever it might be. All right, turning to camp resolutions. We've got 5 to share. They're going to be kind of nice and clear and tight, and so that you can jot them down if you want. We'll put at least references to them in the show notes. We'll link a couple of things back to things we talked about before. But we've got 5 that we're going to dive in for this year. These again are things that like they come from either some concepts that have come up in the last year and we think will make a difference in the next year, or some data, or often both. And so that's where these things come from. And the hope is that Sacred Playgrounds or others are doing some things to maybe equip these or set, like we talked about, those systems or processes in place. So that's the plan.
Alrighty.
Are we
Let's
ready,
dive in.
Jake? We're
I'm
gonna
ready.
dive in.
All right.
Jake, you're on number 1. We're gonna go back and forth and share these. You're on number 1. Tell us
I'm on
about
number 1. All right.
New Year's resolution number 1.
Number 1, a system for studying scripture. So, you know that I've talked about this before, how important it is to get into the Bible and get into the Bible daily. And so make sure that you have a system in place. A lot of you already do, but a lot of us get lax on it. Like we have it for a little while and then we get off of it, and we don't always dive into scripture on our own. And this is something that's super important for our personal spiritual development, and for our ongoing knowledge of scripture as professionals who are working in as Christian professionals. And so get a system in place that is going to get you into scripture every single day. And there are multiple ways to do this. Some people work through the Bible in 1 year. And so this is a great time to start one of those 1-year Bible. I did that 1 year, and it's actually really, it's a great system because it's got January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, etc. So even if you're starting now, you can sort of catch up and do that 1-year Bible. But that's very ambitious. And so if you do 1 chapter a day, that gets you through the entire Bible in about 3 years. So if you want to do the cover to cover, but also otherwise, I would just say if there's a devotional resource that you've got that makes sure that you have scripture every day, and with some reflection, that can be very valuable. So one of the ones that I use is the Luther Seminary one. And so I, as an alumnus from Luther Seminary, I get that, and that's one of the ways that I dive into scripture daily. And so it's called God Pause. And so that's one of the things that I use. I also have a couple of devotional books that I use, and then I do a chapter a day as well. So just making sure that you're doing that is super important, and commit to it. Commit to it, and having something with those dates on it really does help.
I think I brought up before, my wife has a couple of the books she's written herself. She's contributed a handful. A couple
Right.
that are just hers are devotional books. There's a fall one around pumpkin spice. I think I brought that up this fall. There's a Christmas one, that one's kind of focused on moms. But the point is, one of the things that was really helpful, and she keeps getting feedback on that are really helpful, is how accessible it is. And it's pretty close, actually, in a layout to Holy Ground, the one that we do for summer staff, where there are these 4 clear sections: scripture every day, scripture every day, scripture every day. Some reflections, but not long, right? These aren't pages and pages and pages of reflections that we know we're not going to be able to get into, and a quick prayer and then a reflection or something to do. But I appreciate how accessible that is. And so if you're one who knows your time gets lost, gets limited, is potentially inconsistent, having something like that puts it in your hands, puts it in your face, whether that's an app, whether that's an email, connecting to something that we already do daily, we actually do daily, it was really helpful for me, and keeping it bite-sized enough to be accessible when I know I can't read multiple pages.
Super important. And that's why we developed Holy Ground for summer staff. And of course, that's just for those 12 weeks during the summer. But trying to equip your staff members with scripture and reflection is super important. But it's even more important that you do it. It starts with you as the camp leaders. And so make sure that you're getting into scripture and you're modeling that behavior, and you're also getting into that rhythm so you have that knowledge of scripture, and that scripture can speak to you again and again each day, because that's one of the ways that God speaks to us. So make sure that you're getting into scripture. And so that is New Year's resolution number 1, get a system for studying scripture.
Awesome. Number two is equip your enthusiasts. Number 2 is equip your enthusiasts. So let's talk for a second about who those are and where that came from. So your enthusiasts, it's like it sounds. Your enthusiasts are people who love camp. They love camp. They often participate in at least one, if not more, ways with camp. They are the folks who tend to speak positively, advocate for, and encourage others to come to camp, engage with camp, give to camp. So some of that terminology came out of Camp and Church Leadership Project study we did with, that one was with a handful of Lutheran folks, but we ended up sort of stratifying. This was around pastors in particular. We've seen it break out in, I would say, kind of a bigger picture to church leaders in general, where enthusiasts are this highly engaged group, and then there's accommodators and then those that don't connect. But equipping your enthusiasts to market, connect, encourage for you is a resolution that we have for you this year, right? So one is identifying those. Who are the folks that love camp? Who are the folks that are going to do that? Because often all you have to do is put something valuable in their hands, and make an ask, and they'll do it. So those are the ones that are easiest and most impactful, most influential to equip. Right, so we want to make sure they're equipped. Don't assume that they're just gonna they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it in conversation. But if we equip them and make an ask of them, that's really helpful. We want to do what we can, sidebar, to kind of move as many of those accommodators. So maybe they get some of the similar equipment to become more enthusiasts. That can help them kind of move up that ladder. But for sure, your enthusiasts, make sure that we are equipping them with things to actually do what you hope they do. Right, so promote camp, connect families with camp. And this is especially true for church leaders. And so, well, we're in the midst of building something out around this so that we'll actually here's your kit. We're calling it Why Camp. The idea is that you as a camp leader will be able to get this, and you'll be able to send this out to your engaged church leaders. Maybe it's your whole list. Maybe it's those, with some individual personal asks would be the most valuable. You'll be able to send out this stuff, this kit, this equipment, that you'll be able to put your own camp branding and theme and all of this on there so that you can equip them to share with their parents the value of camp, the difference camp is making. And we'll put some data behind that too, of course, like we do, so that you're not just saying, yay, camp. You're able to really say, here's the impact camp makes on homes and families. So those church leaders that you are connected with, camp folks, those church leaders, those pastors, those maybe even community leaders can send that on, can get that into their own communications and connections and marketing. So that's a really tangible way to be equipping this camp church home circle that we talked about all the way last year.
Yeah, this is so important. I mean, so this is actually getting them resources. This takes some intentionality and takes some work, right? You can't just assume that they're going to do this and with some conversation or like something on the website, they're just going to do this. That's not equipping. You've got to actually bring these folks together, give them the tools, give them the skills, give them the words to use as they're talking with people about camp, and ask them to do it, right? Part of equipping is asking them and sending them forth, right? And so are you able to train them in a way that then sends them out into their congregations, into their communities to be those enthusiasts? And the enthusiasts, for sure, church leaders, you want to start with them, but also those folks in the congregations that might be ambassadors for your camp. And I know some camps have this system in place or did, and it's hard to maintain that system of having that enthusiast person who's not necessarily the church leader in each congregation. Those are your camp ambassadors. And so can you do that? Can you equip them? And also your parents that are your big supporters and your big enthusiasts that are going to be talking about camp in the community, can you equip them as well? Because those are the people that have those trusted relationships with other folks, can bring more people into your camp. This is such an important one. So find your enthusiasts, equip your enthusiasts, get them those resources.
You can usually find them. I mean, a lot of you just know who they are. Just to wrap this up, you often just know who they are. right? Because they're showing up. They're sending emails. They're checking in. They're bringing kids. They're whatever it might be. You often can find them. The other thing you can do in most of your systems is you can often check on things like who you can see engagements, right? How many times they've come. So you can check in a lot of your camp management systems. Hey, who filter by the people who have registered for 2 or more things in the last year or things like that. You can often kind of identify folks like that. So if you're looking for like email lists or things like that to send out, you can often do things like that. So yeah, so that's resolution number 2 here, friends. Equip your enthusiasts, find them, and put things in their hands. We're gonna put one of those together. We're finishing building it right now. It'll be out in the next few weeks, where you'll be able to, we'll put that in your hands some too with some data behind it. So that's
Awesome.
2.
Thanks, Jared.
Jake, what's 3?
Number 3. Number 3 has to do with the camp program itself, and so this is something to get ahead of right now. And this one is create cabin conversations, and we want to emphasize this because of the value that we've seen in the data in these conversations among cabin mates, and the value that we've seen in research in general about conversations, not just at camp but also in the home. This is the number 1 factor in faith retention. The number 1 factor in faith retention is conversations about God and faith with parents. And so as we increase the frequency of that, we increase the likelihood that young people will continue to be curious about the faith, ask questions, engage with a faith community after they leave the home, as they enter their emerging adult years.
All right, that feels like a big deal. Hey, let me hit this quick, and then I'm going to make you say that again.
That of the week. That of the week. That of the week.
Hit us with that one more time, Jake. Our stat of the week this week is what?
The number 1 factor for faith retention is conversations with parents about God and faith. This comes from the National Study of Youth and Religion. This comes from other stuff that Christian Smith has done. So important. It's isolated in regression analyses and things like that above other different factors that might influence faith as people leave the home. This has been isolated as the number 1 factor.
So what that means then for camp, right, we've talked about these interventions, like we've told stories about our friends at Judson and what they did with equipping prayer or whatever it is, some of these interventions. If we know that makes the biggest difference at home, what can we do about that at camp then to prepare, equip, lay foundation for that?
Absolutely. This becomes so important because this is one of the things that we measure in the Effective Camp Project. And so when we look at these data points, it was 58% last year. 58% of the campers said that they had conversations with their cabin mates about God and faith often or always. 58%. That's the lowest we've seen. This number has been going down. And this is one of the key factors. The trend
there makes a difference.
Exactly. This is one of the key factors for what we call the faith-centered characteristic of the camp experience is one of the 5 fundamentals. How frequently are these conversations happening? If they're happening rarely or not at all, that constitutes what we call a breakdown in the faith-centered aspect of camp. And so these should be just like breathing. They should be so natural. You're immersed in the faith environment at camp. You're living and breathing it. And so the conversations, it shouldn't just be during Bible study or during worship. It should be as you're walking from place to place. It's incorporated into everything. So are these things happening sort of naturally? And are you facilitating them properly? And so really equipping your cabin counselors and your other staff members to facilitate these conversations is incredibly important. And so teaching the skills to do this and teaching the importance of this during staff training and then practicing it again so that it becomes natural to the summer staff. So that in their interactions with each other and with you, they're bringing scripture in, they're bringing God and faith in. They're saying, how did you see God today? Where did you see God at work through this? And where did you have a glimpse of God's presence during this hard thing that happened at camp, and so forth. So there's different ways that we can facilitate these things. Put that program in place. Really emphasize it this summer because it is so important. And then follow that up by equipping. So you're teaching it, and you're practicing it at camp, you're facilitating these conversations, you're creating these cabin conversations, and then you're equipping them to take it home to have these conversations then with their parents. And so that becomes the next step where you connect that. I will say one more thing about the cabin conversations. These happen because you have a trusted cabin community. People are able to open up and have conversations that they might not feel comfortable having somewhere else. This means that at the front end of the camp experience, you really need to emphasize group building. You really need to emphasize trust. You can't just assume that it's going to happen organically or naturally, especially in this post-pandemic reality where we're having more and more trouble connecting with other people and trusting other people because we've been so isolated or we've only been communicating through screens. This is so important at the front end. The first thing, make sure you're facilitating those cabin trust building activities and working through some of the challenges and then working that into the conversations. That's part of the trust building itself, is facilitating these conversations. So that's New Year's resolution number 3, and I think it's super important, and that's why I'm talking about it passionately.
Right.
Create cabin conversations specifically about God and faith and teach that.
Number 4, you've heard us bring this term up, and it's come up actually in a handful of, so very quick version, anytime that we work with a camp to do like an effective camp project or a group of camps, there's all the data and there's the reports and things like that, and then we always have a conversation. We always have a consult. We talk through the reports, and we found ourselves regularly bringing up this idea in those conversations as well. And it came from a chat we had on this very podcast with our friend Travis Allison from Go Camp Pro. You can listen back to that. We'll try to link in the show notes. But one of their kind of pillars, one of the things they talk about most in their resources, and Travis talks about this a lot, is this idea of a noticeably improved product. So that's the resolution, is this summer have a noticeably improved product. At your camp. So what that means is, like it sounds, right? So your product, your experience, the thing that people are buying, they're opting into, they're choosing, they're doing it on purpose, right? We are an industry where people are buying in, opting in to an experience for a certain amount of time with certain expectations, all the above. And so setting those expectations is super important. The hope is, the goal is, the resolution is that parents and campers, in particular, those two audiences, would come back to camp this next summer and say, wow, I can tell that they made a change, made a tweak, made an improvement. I can noticeably tell that they did something there, and I love that. That was so helpful. That made a big difference for my experience. And so we've been identifying that in reports and things like that, where either there's a breakdown where we hear, a handful of folks saying communication during the week of camp was really tough. All right, we wish we had more this, and this. Okay, what are 1 to 3 things that we can do to noticeably improve that experience, noticeably improve that product? And so whether it's kind of a thing that you notice folks have asked for that have been a breakdown, or something you can really do that is special, unique, a highlight, especially in those parent interactions, front end, back end, during the week when they're not connected, noticeably improve those products, noticeably improve that experience, again, so that campers, and I'll say especially parents, can tell, they can notice. They notice that you did something on purpose and it made a positive difference in the experience for them and their camper.
Absolutely. This is so important. And I want to emphasize the word noticeably, because that is so important. You can say, we improved things, we put more wood chips on these trails and they look so good. But if people don't go back to those trails, they never see that. And so when we talk about the noticeably stuff, look at the stuff that is in front of everybody. And so the things that people are really going to notice a change in is food service improvement. Sometimes the front end facilities, if you improve something there, that'll pop for them. The communication that
cabins
Jared
and
mentioned.
bathhouses.
Yep. So the bathhouses, sure, but some of these front end facilities, the communication pieces, if you're doing that better, always. That will be noticeable. So look at those things that are really gonna hit a lot of people and impact a lot of people, and how how are you going to impact those things? That doesn't mean you shouldn't wood chip your trails. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying don't do that and say, oh,
Jake's going for a run.
we have a noticeably improved product. Do that because that's an important thing to do as well. But when we're talking about these noticeably improved products, really focus on those front end pieces. The other one that I would really emphasize would be the drop off or pickup procedures. And so if that is noticeably improved, if it's a smoother experience or it's a more friendly experience, people will notice that and they will comment on that. This was better than it has been before. Even if you already do a great job at something, how can you improve it even incrementally so that people say that went above and beyond?
Yeah. And that's a good call out, just to maybe wrap on that one. It doesn't always mean fix the thing that's broken. It might mean lean into the thing that's fine and noticeably improve it. Noticeably improve so that people say, wow, that people say, I can tell. So noticeably improve your product, camp leaders. Noticeably improve your experience and share that, tell that story before, during, after. Let folks know. There's 4. Noticeably improve product. Jake, number 5.
Number 5.
The last resolution.
So this one, we went back and forth on what we wanted to do with number 5 here. And this one is one that's is dear to my heart. And I mean, you've heard us talk passionately about democracy a couple different times and the importance of camp as a democratic decision-making place. And so this one, number 5, is contribute to society. It's sort of a general thing. I don't want to get super political here, and that's not what this is about. This is about saying, how is our camp and the experience at camp directly contributing to the larger society, to democracy itself? And there are several different ways we can do this. And I'm gonna mention 2 of them in particular. One, I think, is through the community engagement that comes through something like citizen science. And so citizen science programs are ways that you and your campers can directly participate in ongoing research, oftentimes at a university. Sometimes high schools contribute to citizen science, things like this. And so one of the examples is at a camp that I worked at, we had bat houses, and so a nice bat population, and they always come out at a certain time of night, right at dusk. And so we had our campers, a group of campers, sit there and count them as they came out, because these bat counts were part of a citizen science program at a local university that went into the study of the problem with the brown bat population and the white-nosed bat syndrome that was decimating that bat population. And so that was one example. There was another one where we did a beekeeping thing where we had honeybees at camp. And so there was a citizen science component to that, and the local university participated. So I'd say connect with your local university and see if there's a camp enthusiast there. I can almost guarantee you that there is. And is there a program, especially with their science department, that you can participate in that will contribute to the broader knowledge of society itself, and encourage your campers that this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Other ways that people do this at camp, through sometimes it's environmental protection things like solar projects and things like that might feed back into the grid. That might be a contribution in that way. Another key way would be advocacy of some sort. So advocating for especially marginalized communities. Are you able to open up some of your space for this? Are you able to have retreats that promote well-being among especially marginalized groups and contribute to your community and to society in that way? So have a forum for learning about some of these marginalized groups or directly advocating for them. And so there again, these are 2 kind of very different ways of doing this, but they're both on the same theme of we want to be part of the society. We don't want to be cloistered or set apart from it. We want to contribute to it and promote democracy in this way. And part of that is contributing, right? Participating in it. And so encouraging the young people to do this. A camp can be a great place for them to learn about this and learn about the importance of contributing, and offer a couple different ways to do that. So I would say the two that I'll lift up, and there's multiple others.
I got
that
one more too.
Would love to hear, but advocacy and the citizen science. Go ahead, Jared.
Well, I mean, the other one is just kind of about using what you have, which means like using your space to create space for these things, to host these engagements, conversations. One of the camps I worked at, one of their annual things was 600 kids from the school districts came out, and the county soil conservation group partnered with the schools to do this event, and they used camp as the space.
Awesome.
Right. And if you've got any of these things that you might intentionally advocate for because they're mission aligned with your mission in particular, to host to connect with the groups that are having conversations around that. Maybe it's a meeting, maybe it's a gathering, maybe it's a retreat. So to offer your space for those things can be a simple way to show a super clear partnership. Say, hey,
Absolutely.
come do this. We've got great space for this. Let's have that conversation here. We'll be part of it. We'll join it.
Yep. And let's also say that it's part of proclamation, right? This is who we are. This is what Christians do.
Mhm.
We create spaces for people to have these conversations, but we are great environmentalists. We are people who advocate for other people and who make space and are welcoming. And so not everybody sees Christianity in that way. Some people see it as very exclusive because of the way they see it in the news and things like that. But being a Christian witness is also important. And so that's another reason that we might say this is important. We're going to contribute to society in this way, even if it doesn't directly benefit us financially. Benefiting society is part of our mission.
Yeah. There was, Jake. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, let's review quick. Number 1 is about you. It'll spill over, but about you. A system for studying scripture. Number 2, equip your enthusiasts. Number 3, create cabin conversations. Number 4, noticeably improve product. And number 5, contribute to society. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. New Year's resolutions for you, our friends, our fellow camp folks. So take 1, take 3, take 5 that makes sense for you and put something in place. And do that soon so that you're not like Jake and me with my piano and German from last year. So setting the systems in place like we talked about with our own things, and with all of these, set that system in place now so that these resolutions become realities.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for listening to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. Thanks for listening to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/sacredplaygrounds or at Sacred Playgrounds on Instagram. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you're getting this podcast. And if you like this content and it's helpful, you can support the podcast by clicking that support button. Our theme music was written and performed by Taylor Wilson. You can find all his original songs wherever you get your music. Learn more about what we're up to and connect with the team at sacredplaygrounds.com.